The lecture hall buzzed with nervous energy as students from across the galaxy settled into their seats. Professor Veltar stood at the front of the room, his crystalline skin catching the artificial light. His four eyes moved slowly across the classroom, studying each face with the careful attention of a seasoned teacher. Hyun-Woo sat in the back corner, trying to make himself invisible. He pulled his hood up slightly and kept his head down, pretending to organize his notes. Around him, his classmates chatted excitedly about the day's topic. The insect-like Kretak students clicked their mandibles in anticipation. The plant-based, Morden swayed gently as they whispered among themselves. The ethereal Vashtai floated just above their seats, their translucent forms shimmering with curiosity. "Welcome, students, to today's special lecture," Professor Veltar announced, his voice carrying easily through the hall. "Today we will discuss one of the most dangerous topics in xenobiology. We will learn about Death World species, specifically those from the planet the locals call Earth." Hyun-Woo's blood turned cold. His pen stopped moving across his notebook. He had hoped this day would never come, but deep down, he had always known it would happen eventually. "As you know," the professor continued, "the Galactic Council has classified Earth as a Class X death world. This means it is completely unsuitable for most known life forms. The gravity alone would crush many of you instantly." A small Fluoride student named Minseo gasped audibly. Her rabbit-like ears twitched with fear. "Professor, surely you're exaggerating." Professor Veltar's expression grew serious. "I wish I were, Minseo. Earth's gravity is nearly twice our galactic standard. But that's not the worst part. The planet experiences what the natives call weather. These are massive atmospheric changes that can kill in minutes." Hyun-Woo remembered the thunderstorm from last week on his home planet. He had enjoyed watching the lightning dance across the sky while rain cooled the summer heat. To him, it had been peaceful. He never imagined other species would see it as a weapon. "The atmospheric composition is highly corrosive," Professor Veltar explained, bringing up a holographic display of Earth's chemical makeup. "The oxygen levels alone would burn through most of our respiratory systems, and yet somehow life not only survives there but thrives in ways that should be impossible." Yunbi, a gentle Vashtai who sat near Hyun-Woo, turned slightly in his direction. "Can you imagine living on such a world?" she whispered to him. "I can barely handle the gravity here at the academy, and it's only 80% of Earth standard." Hyun-Woo nodded stiffly, not trusting his voice. He remembered how light and bouncy he had felt when he first arrived at the academy. It had taken weeks to learn how to walk normally without appearing to float with each step. "Now," Professor Veltar continued, "let's discuss the apex predators of this Hellworld, the species that somehow rose to dominate an entire planet that should have killed them long before they developed intelligence." The room fell silent. Even the normally chatty students stopped their whispered conversations. "They call themselves humans," the professor said, and Hyun-Woo flinched slightly. "According to our intelligence reports, humans are persistence predators. Do you know what this means?" A proud Kretak student named Taimin raised his clawed hand. "They hunt in packs?" "Worse," Professor Veltar replied. "They hunt by never stopping. A human can run for days without rest, following prey until the target collapses from exhaustion. They don't need to be faster or stronger than their prey. They just need to outlast it." Hyun-Woo thought about his morning jogs around the academy campus. He had kept them short and slow, not wanting to attract attention. Back home, he regularly ran marathons for fun. Here, even his careful exercise routine made other students stare in amazement. "Their physical capabilities are beyond our understanding," the professor continued. "They can lift objects many times their own body weight. They can survive injuries that would be fatal to most species. Their pain tolerance is so high that they often don't realize they're hurt until much later." Duyeon, a peaceful Mordun student, raised one of her leaf-like appendages. "Professor, how do we know all this information? Has anyone actually encountered these creatures?" Professor Veltar paused, his four eyes blinking in sequence. "That's classified information, Duyeon, but I can tell you that the Galactic Council's first contact protocols list humans as Avoid at all costs. They are considered too dangerous for normal diplomatic relations. Hyunwoo's heart sank. He had come to the academy hoping to learn about other cultures to maybe help bridge the gap between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. Instead, he was learning that his very existence terrified everyone around him. But surely they can't be all bad, asked Jinho, a young Zenthari with the same crystalline features as the professor. I mean, if they're intelligent enough for space travel, they must have some redeeming qualities. Intelligence in humans is perhaps their most dangerous trait, Professor Veltar replied grimly. They are tool users, but not in the way we understand tools. They turn everything into a weapon. Their own bodies, their environment, even other species. They have a saying, if it exists, humans will find a way to weaponize it. Sujin, another Vashtai student, floated higher in her seat. What about their social structure? Do they have families like we do? They form what they call pack bonds, the professor explained. These bonds can extend beyond their own species. Humans have been known to adopt members of other species into their packs and defend them with the same ferocity they show toward their own offspring. Hyunwoo thought about his friends back home. His study group included 2 exchange students from peaceful worlds. He had helped them learn human customs and had even stood up to bullies who made fun of their differences. At the time, it had seemed like the natural thing to do. Now he wondered if his friends had seen it as some kind of predatory behavior. The most disturbing reports suggest that humans can form emotional attachments very quickly, Professor Veltar continued. They seem to genuinely care about the welfare of other species, even those they've just met. This makes them incredibly dangerous because you might not realize you're dealing with a human until it's too late. The classroom fell into an uncomfortable silence. Hyunwoo could feel his classmates shifting nervously in their seats. A few of them glanced around the room, as if suddenly worried that a human might be hiding among them. Tomorrow we'll discuss their hunting strategies and problem-solving abilities, Professor Veltar announced. Class dismissed. As students filed out of the room, Hyunwoo remained seated, pretending to pack his bag slowly. He needed time to think. His hands shook slightly as he closed his notebook. Everything the professor had said was technically true, but it painted humans as monsters. They weren't monsters, were they? They were just people trying to survive and make friends in a dangerous universe. Yun-B paused beside his desk. You all right? You look upset. Hyunwoo looked up at her concerned face and managed a weak smile. Just tired. It was a heavy lecture. She nodded sympathetically. I can't imagine living in fear of creatures like that. I'm glad we're safe here at the academy. As she floated away, Hyunwoo whispered to himself, so am I. But he wasn't sure if he meant safe from humans or safe from the truth about what he really was. The next day came too quickly for Hyunwoo's comfort. He had spent most of the night staring at the ceiling of his dormitory room, wondering if he should just leave the academy before things got worse. But where would he go? Earth was too far away, and he had worked so hard to get accepted here. He entered the lecture hall with heavy steps, choosing the same seat in the back corner. The other students seemed more excited than yesterday, chattering about what new horrors they might learn about humans. Hyunwoo pulled his hood up and tried to disappear into his chair. Professor Veltar entered the room carrying a large holographic projector. His crystalline face looked grim as he set up his equipment. Yesterday, we covered the basics about Earth and its dominant species. Today, we dive deeper into human physiology and behavior patterns. The lights dimmed, and a 3-dimensional image of a human skeleton appeared above the professor's desk. Hyunwoo recognized it immediately as a standard medical diagram, but to his classmates it might as well have been a diagram of a monster. Look at these bones, Professor Veltar said, pointing with a laser. Dense, heavy, built to withstand incredible impact. Notice how thick the skull is? Humans have evolved to survive head trauma that would kill most of us instantly. Minseo, the small Fleur-Eye student, raised her hand. Professor, why would they need such thick skulls? Because humans engage in something called contact sports, the professor replied. They deliberately crash into each other at high speeds for entertainment. They call it fun. The classroom erupted in shocked gasps. Hyunwoo remembered playing football in high school and couldn't help but smile slightly. It had been fun, though he was beginning to understand why other species might find it terrifying. Their muscle structure is equally disturbing, Professor Veltar continued, switching to a muscular system diagram. Humans can increase their strength dramatically through something called adrenaline. In emergency situations, they become capable of lifting objects 10 times heavier than normal. Duyan, the gentle Moradin, swayed nervously in her seat. How is that possible? Our bodies have built-in limits to prevent injury. Human bodies do too, the professor explained. But humans can override those limits when necessary. They call it hysterical strength. A human parent once lifted a ground vehicle to save their offspring. The effort shattered bones in their arms, but they didn't stop until their child was safe. Hyunwoo thought about his mother, who had once carried him 5 miles to a hospital when he was sick as a child. She had collapsed from exhaustion afterward, but she had never stopped running. He had always admired her strength, but now he wondered if other species saw it as something monstrous. Their healing abilities are beyond our medical understanding, Professor Veltar continued. Humans can regrow entire sections of their liver. They can survive with only 1 lung, 1 kidney, and even function with significant brain damage. They heal from cuts and bruises in days, not weeks. Jin Ho, the young Zenthari, looked skeptical. Professor, some of this sounds impossible. Are you sure these reports are accurate? Professor Veltar's 4 eyes focused on Jin Ho. I understand your doubt, but these facts have been verified multiple times. Would you like to see combat footage? The hologram changed to show what looked like a training exercise. Hyunwoo recognized it as a basic military drill, but his classmates gasped in horror as they watched human soldiers move with coordinated precision through a mock battlefield. Notice how they communicate without words, Professor Veltar narrated. Simple hand gestures that allow them to coordinate complex attacks silently. They move as one organism, each human knowing exactly where the others will be. Wu Jin, a Kretak student known for his warrior pride, leaned forward in his seat. They look so small and weak individually. That's part of what makes them dangerous, the professor replied. Humans rarely hunt alone. They form pack bonds that can last their entire lives. A human will die to protect their pack, and the rest of the pack will never forget that sacrifice. The hologram switched to show what appeared to be a rescue operation. Human figures moved through dangerous terrain, carrying injured comrades to safety. Hyunwoo remembered similar scenes from news reports back home, but he had always seen them as heroic, not terrifying. They have something they call battle rage, Professor Veltar continued. When humans see their pack members threatened, they can enter a mental state that makes them temporarily immune to pain and fear. In this state, they become nearly unstoppable. Taemin clicked his mandibles excitedly. Now that sounds like a worthy opponent. You wouldn't say that if you faced one, Professor Veltar replied seriously. A human in battle rage once fought for 6 hours with a punctured lung and 3 broken ribs. They didn't fall unconscious until after their pack was safe. Yunbi, sitting near Hyunwoo, shuddered visibly. How do they live with such violence? In their nature? The strangest part, Professor Veltar said, is that they don't seem to see it as violence. To humans, protecting others is natural behavior. They have a saying, no one gets left behind. Hyunwoo felt a lump form in his throat. He remembered his grandfather telling him that same phrase when he was young. It had seemed like simple wisdom then, but now he understood how alien that concept was to other species. Their problem-solving abilities are perhaps most dangerous of all, the professor continued. Humans approach every challenge as a puzzle to solve. They don't accept impossible as an answer. If one method doesn't work, they try another, and another. They never stop trying. Sujin raised her translucent hand. What about their technology? If they're so primitive, how did they achieve space travel? Professor Veltar smiled grimly. Who said they were primitive? Human technology follows a different path than ours, but it's remarkably effective. They build things to last, to work in extreme conditions. Their spacecraft are designed to function even when heavily damaged. The hologram showed images of human cities, with their mixture of towering buildings and green spaces. To Hyunwoo, they looked like home, but he could see how the architecture might seem aggressive to other species, with its bold lines and practical design. They terraform worlds, not by working with existing ecosystems but by completely reshaping them, Professor Veltar explained. They call it controlled violence against nature itself. They make hostile worlds livable through sheer force of will. Hyejin, a brilliant Zenthari student, had been taking careful notes throughout the lecture. She looked up suddenly. Professor, you mentioned yesterday that humans might infiltrate galactic society. How would we recognize one? Hyunwoo's heart stopped. He tried to keep his expression neutral, but he could feel sweat forming on his forehead. An excellent question, Professor Veltar replied. Humans are remarkably good at mimicking other species' behavior. They study social patterns and adapt quickly. A human spy might live among us for years without being detected. But surely there would be signs, Hyejin pressed. Physical differences? Behavioral tells? Humans are very good at hiding their true capabilities, the professor said. They might pretend to be weaker than they are, slower than they are, less intelligent than they are. They understand that their natural abilities frighten other species. Several students began looking around the classroom nervously. Hyunwoo kept his eyes fixed on his notebook, afraid that any sudden movement might give him away. The most disturbing part, Professor Veltar continued, is that a human infiltrator might genuinely care about the people around them. They might form real friendships, real emotional bonds. This makes them incredibly dangerous because you might trust them completely before realizing what they are. As the lecture ended and students filed out, Hyunwoo heard whispered conversations around him. Do you think there could really be humans among us? How would we know? That quiet student from the outer colonies. Have you noticed how strong he is? Hyunwoo's blood ran cold. They were talking about him. He gathered his things quickly and headed for the door, but not before catching Yunbi's concerned look. She had been watching him throughout the lecture, and now there was something different in her expression. Something that looked suspiciously like recognition. Outside the classroom. Hyunwoo leaned against the wall and tried to calm his racing heart. The walls were closing in around him and he was running out of time. Soon someone would ask the right questions, make the right connections. And then what would happen to the monster hiding in plain sight? The third day of the human lecture series arrived with an ominous feeling hanging over the academy. Hyunwoo had noticed more students staring at him in the hallways, whispering when they thought he wasn't looking. His carefully maintained cover was beginning to crack, and he could feel the pressure building with each passing hour. He entered the lecture hall to find the atmosphere had changed completely. Students sat in tight groups, casting suspicious glances at anyone who looked different from their own species. The usual friendly chatter had been replaced by nervous whispers and paranoid observations. Professor Veltar noticed the tension immediately. His 4 eyes swept across the room, taking in the fearful faces and defensive postures of his students. I see yesterday's lecture has made you all more aware of your surroundings, he observed. Professor, called out Ye-jin, a normally quiet Fashte student. Is it really possible that humans could be living among us right now? It's not only possible, it's probable, Professor Veltar replied, causing a ripple of fear through the classroom. Intelligence suggests that humans have been slowly infiltrating galactic society for several years now. They're patient, careful, and incredibly good at blending in. Hyunwoo felt his palms grow sweaty. He gripped his pen tighter, trying to keep his hands steady as he pretended to take notes. Today we'll discuss human social behavior and emotional responses, the professor continued. Understanding these patterns might help you identify a human infiltrator before it's too late. The holographic display showed images of human families and communities. To Hyunwoo, they looked warm and inviting, but he could see how other species might interpret the close physical contact and emotional expressions as threatening. Humans form what they call family units, Professor Veltar explained. These bonds are incredibly strong and often extend beyond blood relations. They will adopt complete strangers into their family groups and defend them with the same ferocity they showed toward their biological offspring. Mincio raised her small hand, nervously. Professor, that almost sounds nice? That's exactly what makes them so dangerous, the professor replied sharply. Humans use kindness as a weapon. They make you feel safe, protected, cared for, and then, when you least expect it, they reveal their true nature. Hyunwoo's stomach churned. He thought about all the times he had helped his classmates with heavy lifting, studied with them when they struggled with difficult concepts, or simply listened when they needed someone to talk to. Had they seen his kindness as manipulation? As some kind of predatory behavior? Let me give you a specific example, Professor Veltar said, switching to a new hologram. 3 years ago, on the mining colony of Kepler 442b, a human infiltrator spent 2 years working alongside a mixed-species crew. They called him a model employee, helpful, hardworking, always willing to assist others. The classroom hung on every word. Hyunwoo felt like he was listening to his own future being described. When the colony came under attack by raiders, this human single-handedly defended the entire population. He killed 37 attackers in hand-to-hand combat, while his co-workers evacuated. The colonists thought he was a hero. Wasn't he? Asked Doyeon, her leaf-like appendages trembling slightly. The point is, Professor Veltar continued, his co-workers had no idea what he was capable of until the moment he chose to reveal it. They had been working next to a killing machine for 2 years, completely unaware of the danger. Shung Ho, a nervous Morden student, looked around the classroom fearfully. How do we protect ourselves if we can't identify them? Observe behavior, patterns, the professor advised. Humans have certain tells that are difficult to hide completely. They're stronger than they pretend to be. They react faster than they should. They solve problems in ways that seem impossible to other species. Several students began looking directly at Hyunwoo. He kept his head down, but he could feel their eyes on him like physical weight. They also have an unusual relationship with pain and injury, Professor Veltar continued. A human might brush off an injury that would hospitalize one of us. They see pain as temporary, something to work through rather than something to avoid. Jinho suddenly sat up straighter. Professor, last month during the zero-gravity training exercise, I saw a student dislocate his shoulder and just pop it back into place like it was nothing. Is that normal for colony humans? Hyunwoo's blood froze. He remembered that incident clearly. He had dislocated his shoulder during a clumsy maneuver and had reset it automatically, the way he had been taught in basic first aid. He hadn't thought anything of it at the time. Colony humans should still have normal pain responses, Professor Veltar replied thoughtfully. Such casual treatment of serious injury would be highly unusual unless... He paused, his 4 eyes, scanning the classroom carefully. The silence stretched uncomfortably long. Students began looking around at each other with new suspicion. Hyunwoo could practically hear their thoughts as they remembered every interaction, every moment when someone had seemed unusually capable or strong. There's another behavioral pattern to watch for, the professor continued. Humans have an instinct they call protective aggression. They become extremely dangerous when they perceive a threat to someone they consider part of their pack. Taemin clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. Like when that quiet student from the outer colonies stepped between those bullies and the small Fluoride girl last week. Every eye in the room turned to look at Minseo, who squeaked softly and tried to hide behind her desk. Then slowly those same eyes turned toward Hyunwoo's corner of the room. That's exactly the kind of behavior I'm talking about, Professor Veltar said slowly. His crystalline features had taken on a sharp, focused quality. He wasn't even angry, Minseo whispered, her voice barely audible. He just stood there, and somehow the bullies backed down. They were 3 times his size, but they just effed. Hyejin, the brilliant Zenthari student, was staring at Hyunwoo with obvious calculation. Come to think of it, I've never seen him strain when lifting heavy equipment. Even things that should require 2 or 3 students to move. And he's always so calm, added Sujin. Even during the emergency drills when everyone else panics, he just knows what to do. Wu Jin, the proud Kretok warrior, suddenly looked very uncomfortable. I challenged him to a sparring match 2 weeks ago. Thought it would be easy since he's so small and quiet. But he moved like water. Like he knew exactly what I was going to do before I did it. The pieces were falling into place around Hyunwoo like a cage closing. He could see the recognition dawning in his classmates' eyes, the fear and fascination mixing in equal parts. His reflexes are incredible too, Yunbi said quietly, floating slightly higher in her seat. Remember when that chemical beaker fell during lab work? He caught it before any of us even saw it falling. Professor Veltar had gone very still, his 4 eyes now focused entirely on Hyunwoo's corner of the room. And where exactly did you say you were from? He asked, his voice carrying clearly across the silent classroom. Hyun-Woo looked up slowly, meeting the professor's gaze for the first time since the lectures had begun. Every instinct told him to run, to fight, to do something to escape the trap that was closing around him. But he forced himself to remain calm, to keep his voice steady. The outer colonies, Professor. A small agricultural world. Very peaceful. Agricultural worlds typically have lower gravity than standard, Professor Veltar observed. Their inhabitants are usually taller, more fragile, built for light work, not heavy lifting. The silence in the room was deafening. Hyunwoo could hear his own heartbeat, could smell the fear scent radiating from his classmates. Everything the professor had taught them about humans was playing out in real time, and they were all beginning to understand exactly what they were looking at. You know, Professor Veltar said conversationally, there's one more thing about humans that I haven't mentioned yet. They're terrible liars when directly confronted. They value honesty, even when it puts them in danger. All eyes were on Hyunwoo now. The weight of their stares, their fear, their dawning understanding pressed down on him like the gravity of his homeworld. He could feel his carefully constructed facade crumbling away, leaving only the truth beneath. The truth about what he was. The truth about the monster that had been sitting among them all along, pretending to be just another student looking for knowledge and friendship. But maybe, Hyunwoo thought as he looked around at the faces of his classmates, it was time to stop pretending. The tension in the lecture hall had reached a breaking point. Every student sat frozen in their seats, afraid to move, afraid to breathe too loudly. Professor Veltar stood motionless at the front of the room, his 4 eyes locked onto Hyunwoo's corner. The holographic display still showed images of human families, but now they seemed ominous rather than educational. Hyun-Woo felt the weight of 30 pairs of eyes studying his every micro-expression, analyzing his posture, searching for the telltale signs they had just learned about. His heart hammered against his ribs, but he forced himself to breathe slowly, evenly. Years of hiding had taught him control, but that control was slipping away like sand through his fingers. You know, what I find most interesting about humans, Professor Veltar said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. They have this concept called fight or flight. When cornered, they either attack or run. But there's a third option that's uniquely human. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. They surrender. Yunbi suddenly moved, floating closer to Hyunwoo's desk. Her translucent features were filled with concern rather than fear. Your homeworld, she said softly. What's the gravity like there? Hyunwoo looked up at her, seeing the trap in the question but unable to avoid it. About standard galactic, he said quietly. Standard galactic is 0.8 Earth normal, Hyejin interrupted, her crystalline features sharp with calculation. But you move like someone who grew up in higher gravity. Your muscle density, your bone structure, the way you compensate for this academy's lighter pull. Your reflexes, Jinho added, leaning forward in his seat. During the meteor shower, last month, when debris started falling near the observation deck, you moved faster than our sensors could track. You grabbed 3 students and had them to safety before the rest of us even realized what was happening. Taemin's mandibles clicked slowly. And that sparring match. You weren't just faster than me. You were predicting my moves, like you'd fought Kretok before. I studied your species' combat styles, Hyunwoo said weakly. Cultural research. No one studies Kritak combat forms unless they're planning to fight us, Taemin replied. It's not exactly recreational reading. The circle was closing. Each observation, each remembered moment, added another link to the chain of evidence surrounding him. Hyunwoo could see the fear growing in his classmates' eyes, but underneath it was something else. Hurt, betrayal, the pain of realizing that someone they had trusted, someone they had considered a friend, had been lying to them all along. The chemical spill in the lab 2 weeks ago, Soo-jin said suddenly. You neutralized it with techniques that aren't taught in any galactic chemistry course. You used Earth-specific knowledge. The power outage in the dormitory, Min-seo added, her small voice trembling. You fixed the generator with parts that shouldn't have worked together. But they did work, because you understood the principles in a way none of us could. Do-yeon swayed nervously in her seat. And you're always so protective. When Sung-ho was getting picked on by those upper-year students, you just appeared. You didn't threaten them, didn't fight them. You just stood there, and they left. What kind of agricultural colonist has that kind of presence? Professor Veltar had been listening to each revelation with growing certainty. Now he stepped closer to Hyunwoo's desk, his 4 eyes studying the young human with scientific precision. Show me your hands, he commanded. Hyun-woo hesitated, then slowly placed his hands flat on the desk. Professor Veltar examined them carefully, noting the calluses, the scars, the subtle signs of a lifetime spent in heavy gravity. These aren't the hands of a farmer, he observed. These are the hands of someone who's trained for combat, someone who's used tools designed for maximum efficiency, rather than comfort. The professor straightened up and addressed the entire class. Students, I believe we have a unique opportunity here, a chance to observe a human in their natural environment, so to speak. Natural environment? Yejin asked nervously. Cornered, exposed with nowhere to run. Professor Veltar replied. This is when humans are most dangerous and most honest. All eyes turned back to Hyunwoo. He could feel their fear, their fascination, their desperate need to understand what they were dealing with. He thought about running, about fighting, about all the options his training had taught him, but instead, he made a choice that surprised everyone, including himself. He laughed. It wasn't a threatening laugh or a manic laugh. It was the sound of someone who had been carrying a heavy burden for too long and was finally ready to set it down. The sound of relief mixed with exhaustion. You want to know the funny thing? He said, looking around at all the frightened faces surrounding him. Everything Professor Veltar has told you about humans is technically true. We are stronger than most species. We do heal faster. We can push through pain that would stop others. He stood up slowly, and half the class flinched backward. But instead of the predatory grace they expected, his movements were careful, controlled, deliberately non-threatening. But he left out the most important part, Hyunwoo continued. We choose how to use those abilities. Being capable of violence doesn't make us violent. Being able to hunt doesn't make us hunters. Prove it, Taemin challenged, his warrior instincts overriding his fear. Show us what you really are. Hyunwoo looked at the Kritak student for a long moment. Then, moving with fluid precision that made several students gasp, he reached into his bag and pulled out a small device. With a flick of his wrist, he activated it, and a holographic display appeared above his desk. It showed his real identification, his home address on Earth, his acceptance letter to the Galactic Academy exchange program. Everything he had been hiding laid bare for everyone to see. My name is Hyunwoo Park, he said quietly. I'm 19 years old. I'm from Seoul, Earth, Sol System. I came here because I wanted to learn about other cultures. I wanted to make friends. I wanted to prove that humans and the rest of the galaxy could get along. The silence that followed was deafening. You're actually human, Yoonbi whispered, her translucent form shimmering with shock. I'm actually human, Hyunwoo confirmed. You've been lying to us this entire time, Heejin accused, though her voice lacked real anger. I've been protecting you, Hyunwoo replied. and protecting myself. Would you have talked to me, studied with me, been my friend if you had known what I was from the first day? The question hung in the air unanswered, because they all knew the answer. Professor Veltar stepped forward, his scientific curiosity overcoming his caution. How long have you been living among us? 8 months, Hyunwoo answered, since the beginning of the academic year. And in all that time, have you ever lost control? Ever shown your true nature? Hyunwoo met the professor's gaze steadily. Professor, this is my true nature. Helping Minseo when she was being bullied, studying with Doyeon when she struggled with quantum mechanics, fixing the generator when everyone was scared in the dark. This is who I choose to be. But you could have hurt us, Seung-ho said, voicing what everyone was thinking. At any time you could have. I could have, Hyunwoo agreed. Just like Taemin could hurt any of us with his natural weapons. Just like Professor Veltar could blind us with his light manipulation abilities. Just like any of you could use your natural gifts to harm others. The question isn't what we're capable of. The question is what we choose to do. He looked around the room, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. I chose to be your friend. I chose to help when you needed it. I chose to protect when protection was needed. Those weren't tactics or manipulation. They were choices. Human choices. The revelation settled over the classroom like a heavy blanket. Students looked at each other, then back at Hyunwoo, trying to reconcile everything they had just learned about humans with the quiet, helpful classmate they had known for months. So what happens now? Minseo asked in a very small voice. Hyun-woo smiled sadly. Now you decide whether the monster in the room is the species I belong to, or the fear that kept us all from being honest with each other. And with that, he sat, back down, folded his hands on his desk and waited to see what his friends would choose to do with the truth about the human who had been hiding among them all along. The silence that followed Hyunwoo's revelation stretched on for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Students sat frozen in their seats, processing the fact that everything they thought they knew about their quiet classmate had just been turned upside down. The human they had been learning to fear had been sitting among them all along, helping with their homework and listening to their problems. Professor Veltar was the first to break the silence. His 4 eyes studied Hyunwoo with scientific fascination, but there was something else in his expression now. Something that might have been respect. In 40 years of teaching xenobiology, he said slowly, I have never encountered a situation quite like this. Are you going to report me to the authorities? Hyunwoo asked quietly, his hands still folded calmly on his desk. That depends, the professor replied. Are you a threat to my students? Hyunwoo looked around the room at all the frightened faces staring back at him. Have I been a threat to them so far? Before Professor Veltar could answer, a small voice spoke up from the front row. No, Minseo said, her rabbit-like ears twitching nervously. You saved me from those bullies. You didn't have to do that, you could have just walked away. That's different, Yejin protested, floating higher in her seat. He was probably just maintaining his cover, acting normal. Was I? Hyunwoo asked, looking directly at her. When you were crying in the library because you couldn't understand the quantum mechanics assignment, and I sat with you for 3 hours explaining it until you got it right, was that maintaining my cover? Or was that just being a friend? Yejin's translucent form shimmered with confusion. I don't know anymore. Yunbi drifted closer to Hyunwoo's desk, her fear gradually being replaced by curiosity. Why did you help us? If we're so different from humans, if we're weaker and slower, why waste time on us? Because you needed help, Hyunwoo replied simply. And because you weren't different where it mattered. You were students, just like me. You were scared sometimes, just like me. You wanted to learn and make friends and find your place in the universe, just like me. Taemin clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. But you could have dominated us easily. Your species is stronger, faster, more aggressive. In the natural order, you should be the predator and we should be prey. The natural order, Hyunwoo repeated, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Tae-min, you're a Kretuk warrior. Your people are born fighters with natural weapons and armor. By the natural order, you could have hurt any of us at any time. Why didn't you? Because that's not who I choose to be, Tae-min replied slowly, understanding dawning in his compound eyes. Exactly, Hyunwoo said. We all have capabilities that could be used to harm others. The choice is in how we use them. Dooyeon swayed gently in her seat, her plant-like features thoughtful. But the professor said humans are persistence predators, that you hunt by never giving up. We do, Hyunwoo agreed. But what we hunt isn't always other living things. Sometimes we hunt knowledge. Sometimes we hunt solutions to problems. Sometimes we hunt ways to help the people we care about. He gestured toward his notebook, filled with careful observations about each of his classmates' learning styles and preferences. I've been persistently hunting ways to be a better friend to all of you. That's the same instinct, just pointed in a different direction. Hee-jin, still analyzing everything with her sharp crystalline intellect, leaned forward. The healing abilities, the pain tolerance, the strength, those are all real, aren't they? They're real, Hyunwoo confirmed. But so is the fact that I've never used them to hurt any of you. Jinho, remember when you cut your hand badly during the lab experiment and I helped bandage it? I could have done that injury to you just as easily as I helped heal it. The capability was the same. The choice was different. Jinho looked down at his hand, where a faint scar remained from that accident. You were so calm about the blood, and you knew exactly how to treat the wound. Humans learn basic medical care early, Hyunwoo explained. Not because we're violent, but because accidents happen. We take care of each other. Professor Veltar had been listening to this exchange with growing fascination. You're saying that everything in my lectures was accurate but incomplete? Your facts were right, Hyunwoo replied. But facts without context can be misleading. Yes, humans can enter a state of battle rage when protecting others. But we don't rage because we enjoy violence. We rage because someone we care about is in danger, and we'll do anything to keep them safe. Even die for them, Yunbi whispered, remembering the professor's stories. Even die for them, Hyunwoo confirmed. Is that really so monstrous? Or is it just love expressed through action? The classroom fell quiet again, but this time the silence was thoughtful rather than fearful. Students looked at each other, then back at Hyunwoo, trying to reconcile the terrifying creature from the lectures with the helpful friend they had known. Sung-ho raised one of his leaf-like appendages hesitantly. So when you fixed the generator, during the power outage, I was scared too, Hyunwoo admitted. But I knew how to fix it and everyone else was panicking in the dark. So I did what needed to be done. And when you caught that falling beaker in chemistry class? Instinct. I saw it falling toward Soo-jin and I reacted. I didn't think about revealing my capabilities, I just thought about preventing an accident. Soo-jin looked at him with new understanding. You were protecting me. I was protecting a friend, Hyunwoo corrected gently. Woo-jin, who had been unusually quiet during this exchange, suddenly spoke up. That sparring match we had. You could have beaten me easily, couldn't you? Hyunwoo nodded. Probably. But you didn't. You let me think I had a chance. Made it look competitive. Why? Because beating you wouldn't have accomplished anything, except making you feel bad, Hyunwoo replied. But giving you a good match, letting you test your skills against someone different, that helped you improve. That's what friends do. Professor Veltar stepped closer, his scientific curiosity fully engaged now. This concept of friendship overriding survival instincts, of choosing cooperation over domination, is this common among humans? It's the foundation of our entire society, Hyunwoo said. We succeed as a species not because we're the strongest or fastest, but because we take care of each other. We share knowledge, we help those who need it, we protect those who can't protect themselves. Even when those others aren't human, Minseo asked quietly. Especially then, Hyunwoo replied, looking around at all of them. Professor Veltar, mentioned that humans adopt other species into their pack bonds. It's true. When we meet someone who needs help, someone who could use a friend, someone who just wants to belong somewhere, we don't ask what species they are, we ask if they need help. The transformation in the room was almost visible. Fear was gradually being replaced by wonder, suspicion, by curiosity. Students who had been pressed back in their seats were now leaning forward, eager to understand. So, the stories about humans being dangerous, Du-Yeon began, are true, Hyunwoo finished. We are dangerous, but we're dangerous to those who threaten the people we care about. We're dangerous to problems that need solving. We're dangerous to injustice and cruelty and ignorance. We're not dangerous to friends. Taemin clicked his mandibles in what Hyunwoo had learned was the Kritak equivalent of laughter. All this time we were afraid of the monster in the room, but the real monster was our own fear and misunderstanding. Professor Veltar nodded slowly. It appears I need to revise my lecture, notes, and perhaps my understanding of what makes a species truly dangerous. What do you mean? Yunbi asked. The most dangerous species isn't the one with the sharpest claws or the strongest muscles, the professor explained. It's the one that can make you forget you should be afraid of them. Not through deception or manipulation, but through genuine care and friendship. He looked at Hyunwoo with something approaching admiration. You could have revealed yourself dramatically, used your abilities to intimidate us into accepting you. Instead, you chose the most difficult path of all. You chose to earn our trust and friendship honestly, as yourself. Actually, Hyunwoo said with a small smile, I chose to earn your trust and friendship as the person I want to be. Human is what I am. But friend, helper, student, protector, those are who I choose to be. As the class period ended and students began to pack their things, the atmosphere had completely changed. Instead of fear and suspicion, there was curiosity and warmth. Several students approached Hyunwoo with questions about Earth, about human culture, about what it was like to live so far from home. Min-SEO was the last to leave, pausing beside his desk. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For showing us that being different doesn't mean being dangerous, and for proving that the scariest monsters are sometimes the ones we create in our own minds. As the classroom emptied, Professor Veltar approached Hyunwoo's desk. I have a proposition for you, he said. Oh? Would you be willing to guest lecture for my class? I think my students could learn a great deal from the perspective of someone who has lived on both sides of this fear. Hyunwoo looked around the now empty classroom, thinking about the journey that had brought him here. From hiding his true nature to revealing it, from being feared as a